The presentation I'm giving today is almost entirely a reading of a paper that was published in 2005 by Owen Matthews and Gregory Howell. And I encourage you to read that paper in full because 20 minutes doesn't nearly cover all the detail, interesting and important detail in that document. In about 1999, latter part of 1999, when Greg and I were managing the Lean Construction Institute here in the United States, we got a call from Owen Matthews, and he was calling from Orlando, Florida, where he was the owner-manager of a relatively small mechanical contracting firm. And he called to tell us about forming a company that they called Integrated Project Delivery. So hence the connection. So he said that they formed that company from a number of existing companies in the area. And you can see the list here. But note that it includes architectural firm, general contractor, structural, mechanical, and electrical engineering, and specialty contractors for structural, mechanical, and electrical. And Owen said that they had those companies and many of the individuals within them had formed, worked together off and on in the Orlando area for 20, even 30 years. There had been some close friendships formed. There was even some intermarriage. And that made it the more surprising when he answered Greg's next question. Okay, so setting this up as a dialogue between the two of them. Greg, this sounds interesting, Owen, but why did you form this new company, IPD? Owen said, well, our kinship and friendship ties were strong enough so that we could make small adjustments. What I call trading ponies for horses, but ponies for ponies. But what we needed was to trade ponies for horses. That will become clearer in a moment. And to do that, we adopted the motto of the Three Musketeers: one for all and all for one. And what that meant was that they had their accountants meet together independently of the managers of the companies and come up with a formula for sharing pains and gains. They were going to do projects as a team, regardless of who held the contract. And they were going to, if there was money left over at the end of the project, they would share it in accordance with that formula. If there were losses left over, they would share them in the same way. So Greg and I, we went to Orlando afterwards, and we spent some time meeting people, talking to them, studying, looking at documents and so forth. And after that, there were a number of publications produced, one of which was this 2005 paper that I'm reporting on here. And Greg and I came up, thinking about it, we came up with the obvious link between IPD, Integrated Project Delivery, and by the way, to my knowledge, that's the first use of that term. They invented that term. And lean. So here's our quote: maximizing value and minimizing waste, which is the lean ideal. Doing that at the project level is difficult when the contractual structure inhibits cooperation and innovation and rewards individual contractors for both reserving good ideas and optimizing their performance at the expense of others. Greg, that's very interesting, Owen. How has it worked out? Owen, our first integrated project delivery project, a chilled water plant for the city of Orlando, was completed 6 months ahead of schedule, 10% under budget, and won a quality award. Wow. And this is, by the way, a picture of the interior of that chilled water plant. You can perhaps imagine. It's what I'm told that I was told that they do city balls in this space because it's so beautiful. It's industrial art. Wow. Can you give us some examples of what was done on the project to make it perform better? How exactly were you able to trade ponies for horses? Okay. And Owen gives many more examples than this, but I'll just go through a few. So they used the last planner system, which is for planning and coordination. And they said that it worked even better than normal because it was in the people's interest, the company's interest of the individuals, of all the different individuals on site, to really coordinate, to collaborate, to coordinate. Okay. Problem resolution. There was a change needed just because of an error. And the error was they had a large conduit bank masking one of the roof hatches, the roof hatch for the project. And they came up with a solution. They said, well, we'll build you a new roof hatch in a different place where it's not masked, and you'll still have this half one available as well. And to do that, there was no change in cost, no change in time. They just did it, right? Okay. So that might strike some of you as unusual. Handling major changes. So the intent on that project was to match old, they were expanding the plant to match old, new cooling towers with old ones. They had ordered those, made a contract for delivery, and then were informed by the vendor, by the supplier, that they had changed the footprint and the height of those towers. The client decided, no, let's go with a different supplier in order to do what we want to do, which is to match them, right? And making that change, again, because of the commercial terms, didn't require any change in contract. There were no penalties actually for the change for stopping that delivery. And that, I think, and Owen did say, would have been almost impossible in a normal project. Another one, working across traditional boundaries. The electrical contractor got a quote for variable drives which part of the equipment package, which the thinking had been that the mechanical contractor would buy those. And normally, if you wanted to make that shift, you would make a huge amount of resistance. In other words, in order to go with have the buyer be the one who got the best price. In this case, it was easy peasy because it was in the benefits of both the mechanical and the electrical contractor, right? Because it made the project better. Recovering from oversights, a very small oversight, but sometimes even the small ones can take up a lot of time and energy. They discovered that there was a missing elevation on a drawing for an external light. And the general contractor discovered it, called the architect, explained the problem. 30 minutes later, they received a fax. This is 2005, right? Showing the elevation, and it was over, right? No request for information, no exchange of armed guards or addresses of your lawyers. Spending more to save more. So this concerns, I'm going to read it. Normally, the design engineer prepares design drawings from which the contractor prepares shop drawings for fabrication. Major changes in the layout can arise during this translation, and often do. In the case of one of the projects, the engineer sent his designer to the mechanical contractor's office. The designer worked there with an experienced mechanical piping expert to lay out the equipment room in detail using object-based modeling. This increased engineering cost at first, but saved money downstream. The mechanical contractor did not have to produce shop drawings because the engineering drawings were sufficient for fabrication. Okay? So this is just a few examples. Read more in the paper. Now, there's also information that at that time, Owen presented was written up as a case study. Okay, and we wrote that up as a case study later. And this was the North OUC case study. North OUC means Orlando Utilities Commission, and this was the chilled water plant that won that quality award that we saw earlier. And here it is again. Okay. So a few points. Oh, and the placement of columns can be arbitrary to some degree. In other words, they don't have to be exactly in a rectangular grid, right? Mechanical contractor modeled the equipment room using 3D objects for the actual equipment and suggested a column spacing that worked best, even to the point of offsetting one of the columns 18 inches from its predicted location. The structural engineer verified the adequacy of the design. So you can see the depth of collaboration that is happening here between companies and disciplines that would normally be trying to resist those changes. Now they also, and this is an interesting one, they decided at some point early in the project, it would have to be pretty early, to put all the utilities underground, right? And to do that, they had to be very careful about the elevations of the column supports, the footings that you can see in this drawing. And they spent some time figuring it out. And they had the mechanical contractor do the calculation of what the elevation should be to allow for the upturn that would put that would come up into the plant floor at exactly the right point. So the electrical contractor then installed 1 mile of conduit, and you can see it here. They had the advantage of having nothing in the way, right? And it was easily visible to see if there was some layout mistake. Then they faced the challenge then of, well, how do we backfill over it without moving the conduit or damaging it? And they decided to do that. The general contractor took on that job, and they figured out how to do it in a way that worked. Now that increased the cost of work for the general contractor, but it saved, I think they said 3 months off the schedule, maybe 3 weeks. 3 weeks off the schedule is a relatively small project, so 3 weeks was a lot, and reduced cost by thousands of dollars. You can see here, these are, I think the headers, the large main headers are 36 and 24-inch pipe, so significant piping. They were able, because of the collaboration, they were able to add support steel to the main structure so that they could exactly locate the pipe hanger points, right, where they had to be connected to the support steel. And they had the weldments that those hangers would be suspended from attached in the steel fabrication shop, not after they got on site. Right? And they did it so precisely that they were able to hang all of the steel in one day. Right? And everything fit. Greg, this is all very exciting, but surely you've had some problems. Owen, we naturally had to come to agreement about a variety of things, insurance, bonding, job costing, and so on. But the real problems, we did face some real problems. The uncommitted member. So one of the companies that had joined, the people on site were willing to be collaborative, but he was pushing them. He kept pushing them, as you would traditionally, unfortunately, to optimize the profits for their own company. And that, of course, made the whole scheme ineffective. Can't make it work. And they agreed to remove and replace that company, right? So you will have problems despite how much care you take, but you should take care. The other problem was old habits die hard. Now, this concerned a project manager for the general contractor. And it's this individual, they had worked with him on many traditionally structured projects very, very successfully. But he just could not. He seemed like he was affronted that he was not able to perform his traditional role. And eventually they had to replace him. But they didn't replace the company, they replaced the individual. Okay? So those kinds of things are real problems. This is not a quick fix for everything that you're going to have. You're going to have problems because this is hard work. It's complex. Things change, right? But if you can fix those problems quickly and efficiently, you will produce better product in less time for less money with less injuries. So I want to add just a moment on Greg's reflections on theory. And again, there's more detail in the paper. And theory is important, even though this Orlando integrated project delivery was like Toyota, was developed in response to practical problems found in experience, not from theory, but understanding why and how it works is needed in order to teach others how to do it and also to continuously improve it. So here were Greg offered two distinctions that are very important. One is the distinction between types of cost. One set of costs are devoted to production, expending money for producing goods and services and applying those services. And then transaction cost, what Greg called here, costs of doing the deal. So transaction cost in construction include costs of preparing, negotiating, and administering contracts and settling disputes. I think you can see from just a brief description I've had about how this integrated project delivery company worked, that those transaction costs would be significantly less. And of course, we've also seen instances of how production costs were reduced because of the change in commercial terms and organizational involvement. Now, the other distinction Greg proposed, and this was something he found years ago, this guy, Ian McNeil, who was a professor of legal history and theory. And McNeil had studied human contracts, whether they were called that term or not, called by that term or not, but agreements between humans, right? And he said that despite the classical theory of contract, which sees a contract as simply an exchange of this for that, right, with only one possible future that's acceptable or satisfactory, he said, in fact, all contracts are some blend of the transactional and the relational. And he used the marriage vow to illustrate a near complete relational contract. In sickness and in health, in expectation of trouble, we work and strive to maintain and strengthen our relationship. My closing remarks. I'll go into informal mode for a moment. So you might think, well, why am I talking about this when IPD now is typically understood as including the owner rather, in the shared risk and reward, right? And I do it for two reasons. One is that this is part of our history. And if we don't understand our history, that's a mistake. We need to understand our history. And two, it provides a model that can be used where either owner or design build team distrust the other's character or capabilities. Thank you for your attention.